My name is Diane East, and I'm a DOT project manager, and I work for XRiver Technologies. XRiver is a small integration systems company since 1984, and they've been building different kinds of project management systems. Some of them have been outside the box, and some of them have been out of the box. We've been a Planisware partner since 1999 when they first came to the United States. And we're basically working on our second DOT, but we've also worked in pharma and a number of different industries doing Planisware implementation. So that's the role we function in. Over the past 22 years, I've worked with 10 different DOTs in the process of either planning, implementing, or post-implementation support of project management systems. For the Michigan DOT implementation, I was the project manager, and I worked with it from the very beginning with kickoff. We did an extensive requirements. I worked with it through the system testing, user testing, and training aspect, and now I'm currently supporting the post-implementation. One of the key discriminators between DOTs and R&D is their complex capital funding of projects, where they have specific funds that must be used within a period, and if they're not, then they lose the funding. So what they have is a constantly changing program of projects. Also, DOTs today are being asked to scrutinize their funding much more than they have in the past. They're working with an aging infrastructure of roads, so there's a lot of roads that are deteriorating. They're having to do more with less, and if you couple that with an ever-changing portfolio, they're detailed to schedule and have to focus on whether or not they can complete projects on time is extremely important and costly for them. Another impact with DOTs is that they're working with very much old school networks, so change management becomes a very integral part of putting in an implementation in the state government arena. The users tend to be change resistant, so it's a struggle to do that, and it's a very important element. So the thing about DOT projects is that they're very lengthy. They can range anywhere from a few months or a year to up to 20 years. DOT projects start with the identification of a need. For instance, there's too many accidents happening on a certain section of road to, okay, what can we do about that? What are the different options or alternatives we might consider in order to reduce accidents there? And then it branches into, well, who can we get to pay for that? Do we use federal, state, local funds? After all of that is settled and it gets programmed, then we start doing things like designing what will actually take place, and we take the site into consideration, so they figure out whether they need to just put an overlay and change the ramp on the road, or whether they need to completely reconstruct the roadbed. There's a lot of different variations, but it takes many years to get to the point where the design is then complete and it can then be awarded for construction. So some of the things that affect DOTs is because they're overly structured is they also tend to over-automate. So the configuration can be a struggle when they want to keep these structures and systems in place. Along with change resistant, the flexibility becomes limited, and what that does in state government and DOT organizations is it tends to drive the information into data silos, which are also not integrated. Users are simply scrambling to get their job done. So there's a lot of homegrown systems that come up in DOT that we have to take into account as we bring in an application that may or may not replace those. Michigan had a completely customized system, and I think that in almost all of the DOTs that I've touched, they've really, at least in the past, have had completely customized system, but the trend in the industry is in fact to go to a COTS product that can be easily configured. So they wanted to go that way, to do a COTS product. They wanted basic project management functionality, which is available in Planisware, plus a whole lot more. They wanted a tool they could grow with. But one of the things that they had in their existing system was a network generator. They literally had the ability to produce project schedules, so that they could take a project, simply tell you a few facts about that project or characteristics of it, and put it through their network generator and generate those schedules out the other door. So when they looked at Planisware, being able to do that through the equations function, which is out of the box in Planisware, really helped them with the amount of configuration they needed to do in order to repeat that functionality. With the Michigan DOT implementation, we basically had the whole project funded, but we divided it into two different tasks. We did a requirements phase, and through that requirements phase we went through their matrix and we determined what would be out of the box and what would be configuration. At the conclusion of requirements, we basically put out a statement of work for the development. So we kind of had a division between the two. So although it was all funded at once, we didn't have a scope of work until after we'd done requirements. And I think that was very useful to be able to sit down rather than going blind straight from an RFP into a development mode. Taking the time to decide what was going to be configured and what wasn't going to be configured was really important. It ended up resulting in Michigan having a little bit of extra money left over because we actually were bidding it and it was a fixed price task. But when you bid it and you bid fixed price, you have to allow yourself cushion. You have no idea what the client's going to ask for. So once we knew what it was they were going to ask for, we were able to do it. And as a result of that, they had a piece of money left over for enhancements and also extra support that they could do at the end of it. So that was very useful. There were a total of 5 sprints. And after each sprint, we basically walked through the functionality on those and looked to see whether it would meet the business case. And this is where we had instances where we really needed to take a look at whether or not it was a design that was missed or whether it was a new out-of-scope idea. And again, Greg came in very handy in helping us to balance those things. But we basically went through all 5 of the sprints and went straight into system testing, very robust system testing. We did 2 weeks worth of user testing. And then we rolled forward through our training and implementation over the next several months. We dealt with the delay on the Michigan side. They wanted to interface with another system, and that system wasn't going to roll out for 3 months later. So what we did is we took that 3 months and we poured it into our training materials and into our change management aspect, and ended up having a very positive impact on the overall implementation. Users are making updates a lot more frequently than they used to because of the transparency in the system. They also have, through configuration, they've automated getting their projects approved. There's a different source that basically does the controlling of the programs, and that's changed. It was not automated before Planisware came along. I can tell you the PMO office is a lot happier with not being onslaught with massive updates all at once. They're basically being able to see things that they need to look at any week of the month, not just the 1 week of the month that they happen to have the data in. So that's been very helpful to the PMO office. Project schedule generation works pretty much as it did before in the system, thanks to the robust rules that they had available in that. Every week things are getting a little bit stronger. Our implementation went live a few months ago. And every week I think they see that users are embracing it even more, although we had a very good response during our training. After going from a DOS-based system into Planisware, it was like from being in a horse cart to a race car. I mean, it was just a big transition for them. It was a very positive response.